So here's a Suzuki LTZ 400 rear shock that we're gonna mount into the Suzuki LTR 250. Has a reservoir already built in. This one's kind of just really greasy, oily, and dirty, but the good thing is it's like all the seals are good, like it's not leaking. This is just grime from riding around. But the seals seem good to go. I'll inspect them a little bit closer. So got the LTZ 400 shock torn down. It was just really corroded, just old, like a lot of just dirt and grime on it. So kind of got this thing torn down. It has these two collars that you have to break loose, which sits like this. So you have to kind of jam a screwdriver in there and pop these out individually like that. And then you'll be able to slide this out, and then the spring comes out up over that edge. So not too bad. We'll get all this stuff degreased, cleaned up. So yes, did the same thing with the rear shock spring. Sanded it down, degreased it, sanded it down, and then painted it. And then baked it in the oven for 3 hours at 250 degrees. Get a nice cure on the rear spring. So got the rear shock all cleaned up, actually painted the spring, baked that for about 3 hours at 250 degrees, nice cure on the paint. So I'll get this rear shock put back together. So got the shock back together, looking pretty good, nice and clean, degreased. There's no seals leaking, everything looks good to go on it. I'll run this spring rate for a while to see how well I like it. I can always change out the spring rate for a different rate if it's too heavy or too soft or something. So next I've already cleaned and degreased the swing arm. I need to press out these bearings on the swing arm and prep this thing, nice good sanding on it, kind of get out all the burrs taken out of it, get this thing sanded down and prepped for paint. So I'm pressing out the bearings of the swing arm. I don't have a floor press, so the only thing I've ever used is just a vise. Pretty simple, just a socket on one end. This is just some PVC piping, 1 inch. And what's cool is it goes right over the end, fits perfectly and snug. So the bearing that as it gets pressed through goes right inside of the PVC piping. And it works out pretty easy. So just pressing this out slowly, but it's coming out no problem. So I'll get those bearings pressed out, get this thing additional cleanup, some sand, and a prep for paint. So got all the bearings out, no problem, pretty easy. Took about 20 minutes or so. I got the linkage cleaned all up. I'm gonna press those bearings out as well and get new bearings pressed into there. I also used the flap disc, kind of deburr the whole swing arm. There were some pretty nasty burrs all on the bottom end, so kind of used the flap disc to get this all cleaned up. Came out pretty good. So flap disc took out all the really nasty burrs in here. So I'll just take some more sandpaper in it, kind of get it lightly sanded, another good washing, another good degreasing on the swing arm, and prep this thing for paint. So here's the makeshift kind of paint area I have for the swing arm. You want to use these metal wires and these metal hooks because when I'm done painting it, I'm going to bake it in the oven. So you want to use metal so it doesn't melt on you. I got everything taped off, got everything sanded, everything deburred. So let the swing arm bake in the oven. Got it hanging on the metal hangers. Barely fit, but it did fit. So let this bake at 250 degrees for about 3.5 hours. All right, so got the swing arm all done. Just getting ready to press in the bearings. Just using a simple vise. So the way that this goes is a spacer, oil seal, bearing, and oil seal come in from this side. Then on the interior side, you have the bushing, spacer, and a dust cap come in from the inner side. So from the outside, you'll put in the spacer, oil seal, the actual bearing, and then sandwich the bearing with another oil seal right here. It comes in from this side. All right, so here's the shock side by side. This is the 92 Suzuki LTR 250 rear shock, and here's the Suzuki LTZ 400 rear shock. So really the only mod you got to do to make this work, the top mounts are fine, they bolt right in. The lower mounts, you just got to trim a little bit of this lower shock body off. This dog bone slides right into there. It's a little too much meat on the Suzuki, so you just got to do a little bit of trimming to get that to mount up to this dog bone. So let's get this hooked up on the vise and just trim a little bit off the bottom, and get this hooked up to the dog bone. So there it goes, kind of all fit in. Kind of got the air box just chilling out, doing a dry fit. There's the shock. That's a Suzuki LTZ 400 rear shock. And it works on the 91, 92 Suzuki LTR 250 because on that year's the air box actually wraps around the shock. So you can use that reservoir, and that's how that kind of works. It's kind of all mounted up, just kind of sitting there loosely. All new bearings in the wishbone, all new bearings in the swing arm, and fitting pretty good. So I haven't tightened anything down. It's kind of just hanging out, but that's the setup with the LTZ 400 rear shock. Mounts up, no issues with the air box. And next, I'll start putting in the sprockets. I'll start putting in the rear end, the rear carrier, and chain and guide I got and everything else for the rear end. Next, I'll probably start working on electronics, getting electronics squared away, and then start getting this thing back together.